What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the best draft position in 2024 fantasy football. So I know a lot of you out there are going to have some sort of agency in terms of where you're actually drafting in fantasy football. Maybe your league has some sort of challenge where you get to pick your spot based on how you finished. Maybe you're in a league where the picks are randomly assigned, but you can trade with a specific league member. And I think if you do have any agency in where you're picking, understanding the best spot to kind of choose, figuring out the area you want to pick in can be massive in helping you win your fantasy football leagues. There are certain seasons where maybe from pick 1 through 12, there's not a huge difference. Maybe some people have, their leans towards one spot, but overall, maybe one spot doesn't have a ton of advantage. I think this year there's one clear area that feels really gross, and there's one spot that I really like. I feel very confident that you guys can build these fantasy juggernauts from this one position in your fantasy drafts. So we're going to be talking through, what position I think is my favorite, looking at some ADP, putting, players' names to these specific picks, and then I'll also be running through a few different mock drafts from my favorite area, just kind of showing you what starts you can get from my favorite draft position. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, let me know your thoughts. Would also love to hear where you guys think is the best spot to draft for fantasy this year. But let's actually dive into some consensus ADP. So these are not my personal rankings. This is how, drafts are kind of playing out this year for fantasy. This is 4-for-4 ADP, so just combining a bunch of different platforms ADP into one consensus list. So I split these guys up into tiers, just kind of showing you where these guys are going to go in most drafts. So starting off with a pretty clear top three, we have Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill. CMC seems to be the consensus 101. Maybe this calf injury scares some people off, but more often than not, these three are going to be the top three picks. Then I think we have another tier from like pick 4 through 8 with Breece Hall, Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Justin Jefferson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Then another kind of tier here, late first, early second, A.J. Brown, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, and Saquon Barkley. And then I feel like after this range, whether I agree with it or not, I think just consensus ADP goes all over the place. So round 2 area, you've got guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Derrick Henry, Kyren Williams, Devontae Adams, Chris Olave, Drake London, Travis Etienne. But you're going to see a lot of differences from platform to platform. Certain platforms, the wide receiver is going to be way pushed back in this area. You're going to have Derrick Henry, Kyren Williams, Travis Etienne pushed up. On other platforms, maybe the running backs are pushed back. Those wide receivers are pushed up. We also have this 2-3 turn area with guys like Isaiah Pacheco, Travis Kelce, Devon Achane, Sam Laporta, Mike Evans, Josh Allen, Nico Collins, and then players that seem pretty locked and loaded in round 3. Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Waddle, Michael Pittman, Cooper Kupp, Josh Jacobs, DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith, and DJ Moore. So I want to start off by talking about my least favorite spot to draft. In my opinion, if I get a spot from pick 9 through pick 12, I'm not feeling great about it. I'm probably going to be a little bit salty. At least to me, it feels like a very, very gross spot to pick. You can see this tier here from pick 9 through 14, and while I do agree that some of these guys should be going in this area, A.J. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, not as high on Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley, but even though I think that most of these guys should be going in this area, when you draft them late first, when you get into the early second, typically, right, if you have that 1-2 turn pick, you're maybe not getting as great of a first rounder, but you're getting these studs to start off the second round. I think this year is very unique in that the second round, even into like the early to mid third round, is just so unbelievably flat. Like I said, there's very little consensus. In certain platforms, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to go off the board as like the 202. On other platforms, he's going to go late second, maybe falling into the early third. On certain platforms, Derrick Henry is going to go early second. On others, he's going to go 2-3 turn. So I feel like you're getting stuck in the spot where you're having to make a claim on one of these players from a very large tier, where if you had a different draft position, you might just be able to wait, get a better pick in the first round, and then still snag that player later on. And so that's how I'm looking at it here. You're looking at the first 2 guys you're starting off with, whether it's like Jahmyr Gibbs and Marvin Harrison Jr. or Jonathan Taylor and a guy like Devontae Adams or Chris Olave. I just don't think that guy you're getting in the early second makes up from the drop-off that you're getting from not getting one of those, guys in the top 8 picks. So not a fan of the 1-2 turn. I also don't think you're getting a ton of value at the 3-4 turn. There's not a ton of consensus there either, and I don't think that's a spot where I'm like, that area is just infinitely better than like the 4th round picks you'd be getting from like a mid or early 1st round pick. So 9 through 12, not at all a fan. And I'd say like my second chunk that like I'm fine with it, I don't think it's amazing, but I don't hate it, is like the mid 1st round, pick 5 through 8 area. I think you're definitely going to start off with a solid 1st round pick, whether it's Breece Hall, Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think all those guys are very, solid picks in this area. And then second round is going to be fine. You're not necessarily having to reach within that very flat second round. You could still have these guys falling to you, whether it's Marvin Harrison Jr., Derrick Henry, Kyron Williams, some of these wide receivers. Those guys could definitely fall to you in that mid-second round area. So I think your second round pick is pretty similar to what you're going to get if you're picking in the late 1st round. But I think your 1st round pick is definitely a lot better. Getting a guy like Breece Hall over Jahmyr Gibbs, or getting a guy like Jamar Chase over A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, I do think there's a pretty significant difference there. So I'm fine picking in the middle rounds, but by far my favorite spot to pick is the early 1st round, whether it's pick 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't matter a ton. I just really, really like those top 4 picks because you're locking up one of my clear top 4 at this point. My top 4 right now is CMC 101, CeeDee Lamb 102, Tyreek Hill 103, and then Breece Hall as the 104. So you can either start off with a stud running back or a stud wide receiver, but then you're kind of getting to pick the trail end of that flat round 2, where you're not necessarily going out and being able to get your guy, but you're getting guys in a very similar range at pretty much a round discount from the people that have to reach for those players in the early 2nd round. And it just so happens that a lot of players that I'd be willing to take in the early to mid-second tend to kind of fall to this 2-3 turn area. Devon Achane specifically, like if I was drafting one singular team, I would be taking Devon Achane as high as probably the 201. Like I'd probably have him as my 13th overall player. But if I'm going to be in a ton of leagues, I don't want to actually draft him there. But value-wise, that is how high I am on Devon Achane. And I'd be able to get him 2-3 turn area instead of having to reach, a round plus on ADP to get him in that spot. You also have wide receivers like Nico Collins. I think Deebo Samuel is going to be super interesting, especially if the Ayuk trade actually comes through. So I just don't think you're losing really anything with those 2-3 turn picks, but you're just getting an absolute stud to start off your team, really anchor you within the first 4 picks. So top 4 is definitely my favorite spot, and I wanted to jump into a few different mock drafts. So we're going to have a mock draft from all 4 spots, and we're going to start off here at the 101. And not surprisingly, I went with Christian McCaffrey as my top pick. Like I said, he is my clear-cut 101. I'm not super concerned about his calf injury. Based on what I've seen from the fantasy doctors out there, it seems like he should be ready to go week 1, and it seems like historically running backs do not re-aggravate that calf injury throughout the season, or the odds of it happening are very, very low. So went Christian McCaffrey 101. Then at the 2-3 turn area, I went Nico Collins. He's one of those wide receivers where I'd consider like as early as like the mid-second round, maybe even first few picks of that early second, but I'd prefer like mid-second area. So getting him 212, I think is a great pick. Typically the running back I go here if I go double hero RB would be Devon Achane, but he went at the 210, but I'm totally fine taking Travis Etienne here at the 301. So this is a double hero RB start here. I still think the value we're getting at the 4-5 turn is really nice. Tank Dell 412. In terms of my personal rankings, I have him as a top 3 round pick, so I'm getting him 4-5 turn area. T. Higgins at the 501. Then the 6-7 turn, I go Xavier Worthy. Kyler Murray at the 701. Love Kyler. Getting him 7th rounder later, I think is a steal. Went Keon Coleman round 9. Round 8. Njoku round 9. Got 3 more running backs with Chase Brown, Blake Corum, Marshawn Lloyd. Then went Jalen Polk, Tyler Conklin. Not going to focus a ton on those later round picks because at that point, ADP's all over the place. But like I said, I love the 2-3 turn area. I think the guys you're getting at the 4-5 turn are really not much worse than what you'd be looking at in like that 3-4 turn area. Tank Dell, T. Higgins, love the value at wide receiver there. I will say I didn't mention this for picking in the middle of the first round, but I think there is one advantage you get picking there, and that is that you get some solid value falling to you at the quarterback and tight end positions in the middle of round 4. So guys like Lamar Jackson, maybe Patrick Mahomes. You also get Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, maybe an Anthony Richardson falling to you in the mid-fifth area. So I do think there is a little bit of an advantage there in terms of like the round 4, round 5 area for the middle of the first round. But I also think in certain drafts, certain platforms, you're still going to get those players, those tight ends, slipping to the late 4th round, early 5th. Same thing with maybe like a Lamar Jackson. And I also just don't hate the idea of drafting Anthony Richardson in the early 5th. So I guess one slight advantage there for the middle round picks, but I definitely still prefer drafting with one of those first 4 picks. So that was from the 101 here. Overall, solid team, 2 stud running backs. I like the way our wide receivers panned out. Very cool with Njoku in the 9th round, and then Kyler Murray, probably one of, if not the favorite value I have at quarterback this year. Now shifting over to the next mock, we have the 102. Unsurprisingly, we saw CMC go at the 101, so I go with my 102, CeeDee Lamb. Then this is also going to be a double hero RB spot. I talked about how I am very, very high on Devon Achane, got him here at the 211. Derrick Henry went at the 302. He's going to go later on Sleeper than a platform like Yahoo or ESPN. But if this wasn't a Derrick Henry pick, this could have been a Travis Etienne if he fell. Maybe it would have been an Isaiah Pacheco pick if you like Pacheco. But I'd also be fine, going for a guy like Debo in this range. Nico Collins didn't fall, but those guys could have fallen if Derrick Henry went a little bit early on. So it doesn't have to be Derrick Henry if you think he's going to go much earlier, but definitely a very solid start. And then like I mentioned, even though maybe mid-4th round area, you're more likely to get those stud quarterbacks, stud tight ends to fall, we get Mark Andrews here at the 411. You can see we had Sam Laporta go at the 212, Travis Kelce at the 304. In Mark Andrews' healthy games, him, Kelce, and Laporta were completely neck and neck in terms of their production. Andrews should not be going like potentially 2 rounds later than those guys. It doesn't make any sense. So love the value on Andrews. We hammered the wide receiver position with DK Metcalf, Rashee Rice, Deontay Johnson. Like in this range, you're getting a 5th round DK Metcalf. I'm not even super high on DK, but that is crazy value. Rashee Rice, Deontay Johnson, like I said, that 6-7 turn. Went Jonathan Brooks in round 8. I think this mock draft might have been before we learned about him potentially starting the season on the pup, but I still think late round 8 isn't even all that crazy for him. Very high on him still. Christian Watson, round 9. Gus Edwards, round 10, kind of making up for maybe having a running back that's not playable early on. This was a spot where we punted the quarterback position. We didn't get a falling Lamar Jackson. We did not pick Anthony Richardson, but seeing him go at the 608 is absolutely insane. There's no way he should be falling that far. And then maybe we had an opportunity to get Kyler, but we'd already picked him in one of these, so didn't want to pick him every single time. So I went Trevor Lawrence and then Aaron Rodgers as like 2 solid late round options. Finished up with Rico Dowdle, crazy value in the 13th round, and then Dontavian Wicks. But more focused on the early part of this draft, you can see we got a great stud right away. Guys that I could argue, being early 2nd round picks, at least for Achane, Derrick Henry, still think he's a value going in the 3rd. I think most people would love that price tag. And then you're still getting really solid picks with Mark Andrews and DK Metcalf in round 4 and round 5. Now pivoting over to the pick from the 103, this was the one where we did not go with a running back within the first 2 rounds. We went Tyreek Hill at the 102, and then Devon Achane unfortunately got sniped in front of us again at the 209. So I ended up going with Nico Collins. I think in the future, if Ayuk is gone, I'd probably prefer Deebo Samuel if went at the 301, but still think Nico Collins is a really solid pick back into the 2nd, 2-3 turn. And then I did snag a running back with Travis Etienne at the 302. So I'm honestly fine with whichever one of these running backs is like slipping into the 3rd round. I think they all end up being solid values, especially on certain platforms where, like I said, these guys are going to be going early 2nd. Someone's going to have to make that pick. Maybe they really like Travis Etienne. They really like Derrick Henry. They really like Devon Achane. They may be making that call in the early to mid 2nd, and we're getting at least one of those dudes to slip to the early 3rd. And I'm not super picky because if the value's there, I'm fine with it not being like my specific guy that I love. It's still going to be a value. This was another spot where we had a falling Mark Andrews. I think in other platforms, this could potentially be a falling Trey McBride. Love either of those dudes back into the 4th. 2 solid wide receivers with George Pickens, Chris Godwin. Then we get Kyler Murray in round 7. This was more of like a hero RB build. So we get our running back 2 with Jalen Warren, Christian Watson, round 9. More running backs, Chase Brown, Jerome Ford, Marshawn Lloyd, Ray Davis, solid running back room, and then a dart on a young wide receiver in Jalen Polk. Once again, a start I really like. The wide receiver values there. I like 3rd round ETN, getting that elite tight end back into the 4th round. Overall, like the way this draft played out. And then the fourth and final spot here, this was a double hero RB start, and I absolutely love this team. I think this team is looking absolutely stacked. We went Breece Hall at the 104. Then I went with Devon Achane at the 209. Some people may think this is a reach. I know he's going late second on certain platforms, into the third on others. Like I said, I'd be willing to take Devon Achane if I had to in the early second round, so I still think it's a value getting him here at the 209. I think both these running backs have that elite upside. So starting off, double hero RB, I love it. Then I went with 304 Deebo Samuel. Really like that pick if I'm waiting at wide receiver till the third round to get Deebo as my wide receiver one. This also could have been a Nico Collins pick. As you can see, he went at the 305. Then we got a stud tight end and a stud quarterback. We got Trey McBride at the 409. We had Anthony Richardson at the 504. Then we start to get serious about the wide receiver position. Xavier Worthy, Deontay Johnson, Brian Thomas Jr., back to running backs with Brian Robinson, Tajay Spears. Then we threw a few darts at wide receiver with Xavier Legette, Dontavian Wicks, Demario Douglas, and then one other running back in Tyler Algier. This is probably the weakest wide receiver group I have here. Deebo, Worthy, Deontay Johnson, Brian Thomas Jr. We did really hammer running backs, but I typically like having my flexes, through with wide receivers plus one or two, but I still think Brian Robinson and Tajay Spears are definitely guys who you could plug into the flex throughout the season. So I really like this team. I think this start was probably the best one we had. Starting your first 5 picks with Breece Hall, Devon Achane, Deebo Samuel, Trey McBride, and Anthony Richardson, in my opinion, that is just screaming upside. It's screaming that this team has a massive ceiling. So those are going to be the 4 mock drafts. You can see them up here on the screen. I do think pick 1 through 4, that's where you want to be going if you do have any choice. You're getting that stud option early on. You're getting to pick from the back end of a very flat tier where you're not having to reach for some dude that feels like a gross value. So I'm very, very in on picks 1 through 4. But let me know your guys' thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Where's your favorite spot to pick? I'm going to continue putting out these draft strategy videos, so stay tuned. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.